Now, on top of this political turmoil, with the arguments between centralists and federalists, there is also rumor that Spain is trying to reconquer Mexico, right? Remember Ferdinand VII? He's still around. He's still the king of Spain, and maybe he's going to send a Spanish army to Mexico to take back his colony. Right? So Augustin de Iturbide, remember him, right? He was the first Mexican emperor, and eventually he abdicated the throne and he went into exile, went back to Europe, right? For a period of time, he lived in Italy, right? He didn't go to Spain, obviously, right? Because he played an important role in the independence movement, right? But he goes to Italy for a period of time when he first goes into exile and he leaves Mexico. And then from there, Augustin de Iturbide is going to leave Italy and go to England. And so he was living in exile. He had money. He was doing well. But Iturbide is hearing these rumors there in Europe that Spain is planning to reconquer Mexico. Right? And Iturbide, he's still a patriot, right? He still believes in the cause of Mexican independence. And so he actually is going to send word to Mexico that he would like to come back to Mexico and help to fight back against Spain when Spain comes to try to reconquer Mexico. Okay, so Iturbide is still a patriot, right? Even though he's living in exile, even though he was kicked out of Mexico, right? The first emperor here. And so Iturbide is, he's sending word to Mexico saying, hey, I want to return. I'm offering my services to you guys. I want to help and come fight against Spain so Spain's not able to reconquer Mexico. And at this point, it's just a rumor that Spain is mobilizing its forces to reconquer Mexico, right? And so Iturbide hears these rumors. He's trying to contact Mexico. He wants to go back. But instead, when word gets back to Mexico that Iturbide wants to return to fight against the Spanish, the Mexican Congress does not accept Iturbide's offer to come back and fight for the country against Spain. Instead, what they do is they actually create a law that if Iturbide was going to return to Mexico, if he sets foot on Mexican soil, he will be arrested and tried for treason, right? And he would get the death penalty if he was found guilty. The problem is, though, Iturbide doesn't hear back from Mexico in time. He doesn't get the memo, right? He doesn't get the message that this law has been created, which could lead to his execution if he returns to Mexico. He doesn't know that. Right? He's just caught up in this patriotic fervor where he wants to fight back against Spain and maintain Mexican independence, right? And so Iturbide, he doesn't wait to hear back from Mexico, right? He just puts word out there that he wants to return to Mexico to help fight against Spain. And then next thing you know, he's on a boat and he's returning to Mexico. All right, and so Iturbide arrives in Mexico. He doesn't realize that there is this law that has been created by the Mexican Congress where he could be arrested and tried for treason. And that's exactly what happens. Okay, so Iturbide ends up getting captured by the Mexican forces. He is brought to court. He's found guilty of treason, and Augustin de Iturbide is executed, right? And so this is ultimately what happens to the first emperor of Mexico. Okay, he comes back out of exile trying to fight for Mexican independence against Spain because he hears these rumors of a Spanish reconquest of Mexico, but instead he gets arrested by the Mexican government and executed. Oh my. Okay, so a little ironic there, but eventually Spain actually will mobilize its forces and attempt to reconquer Mexico. We'll get to that in just a minute. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the economy of the early Mexican Republic. We talked about last time how after independence, the Mexican economy was in shambles, right? Because of the destruction to the mining industry and the agricultural industry and a number of other reasons as well that took place during the wars for independence. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some of these financial problems of the early Mexican Republic. Okay, so even before the Republic, the colonial period really hurt the Mexican economy as well. Right, we talked about the Bourbon reforms and how Spain was trying to export as much silver out of Mexico as possible to bring it back to Spain. Right, and they were successful in doing so. Right, and so there was a lack of silver reserves in Mexico partially because of the Bourbon reforms, right, where there wasn't a lot of liquid cash left in the Mexican economy, but also because of the wars for independence where the mining industry was really damaged. Okay, and so that's a major issue. And so without as much silver as you used to have and gold, you see the Mexican Republic starting to print paper money. Okay, and they didn't have the silver and gold to back it up all the time. And so the problem here is a lot of merchants, people who are selling goods and services, they didn't really want to accept paper money. And so that is going to hurt the Mexican economy because people don't have confidence in the currency of the country, right? They don't think that it's stable. They don't believe in its value. And so you have a lot of merchants who are very reluctant to accept paper money, and that's going to hurt economic transactions in Mexico. On top of that, you're going to have a lot of banditry, right? Basically, you have people robbing others on the roads, and so the roads are not safe. So there's banditry going on in Mexico at the time, and that's a problem because if you're a merchant and you're traveling around with your goods, you're going to be hesitant to go all the places that you probably would have because the roads are not safe and you may get robbed by a bandit. Okay, and if you do get robbed, that's also hurting the economy as well, right? Because you're losing out on your goods, you're not making profit, and that money's not going back into the economy. And so banditry is a major issue in Mexico during the early republic as well. You also still have infrastructure issues, right? There's a lot of bridges that are damaged because of the war for independence, and so you have different regions in the country not connected as well as they could be because of the destruction of the bridges, because of these infrastructure issues. And that's a problem because you have merchants and goods that need to travel from region to region, right? And so you're not going to have as integrated or efficient of an economy because of these infrastructure issues. Another big problem for the economy of Mexico during the early republic is the price of the army. Right, so Mexico had a standing army of 50,000 soldiers, right, professional soldiers that are getting paid, and that costs a lot of money. And so basically, you got 50,000 federal employees. They need to get paid, right? Especially because they're armed, right? You don't want them having a rebellion because they're not getting paid, right? And so that's a major issue. Another big problem for the early Mexican Republic is debt. Yes, the government is in major debt. Why? Because they took on the debt from New Spain from the colonial period and during the period of the Mexican monarchy, right, with the Mexican Empire under Iturbide. During both of those time periods, Mexico had accrued a pretty significant debt of about 78 million pesos. And so this debt is now being assumed by the early Mexican Republic. Right? And so they got to pay off that debt from the colonial period and from the time of Iturbide's monarchy. So that's a lot of debt, right? And so that means that in order for the early Mexican Republic to be doing well financially, they need to be bringing in a lot of income, and that wasn't happening. Why? Because of their inefficient tax collection system. Okay, so this is how the government makes a lot of its money, right? Through taxes, right? And also this government in particular has monopolies, right? So this should be the sources of income for the government, and they would take this income and they would use it to pay off the debt, to pay for the army, and to fix the infrastructure of the country, etc., right? And so the problem is, though, taxes aren't getting paid for a couple of reasons. One, there's a lot of smuggling going on in the early Mexican Republic. Right, smuggling. So basically, you have people smuggling in goods illegally and selling them on the black market, and those sales don't include tax. Okay, you know what I mean? So if you're buying something on the black market, you're not paying tax. The government's not getting its cut, and so there goes income for the federal government. Right. Another problem is merchants who were selling their goods, a lot of times they wouldn't report the goods that they sold to the government. Right. They just kind of sell things under the table. Right. And so if they do that, then they don't have to pay the sales tax. They could keep it for themselves. Right. So say I was a shoemaker and I wanted to sell somebody a pair of shoes. I could just do it under the table, be like, oh, okay, yeah, give me 10 pesos, I'll give you these shoes, right? And I won't report it to the government that I sold you these shoes. Therefore, I don't have to pay the sales tax to the government. And so you have a lot of merchants who were doing this. So with the combination of smuggling and merchants not paying the sales tax to the government or not reporting their sales so that they don't have to pay the tax, this is going to hurt tax collection for the early Mexican Republic, right? And so they're not going to be able to bring in as much income as they could have otherwise. And so they're going to have trouble paying back their debt to foreign governments or foreign creditors. Right? They're going to have trouble paying for their standing army because they're not bringing in enough income, right? Because people are sidestepping the tax system. And the last thing that is really hurting government revenues is the fact that government monopolies aren't really turning a profit. Okay, so yes, the government has monopolies over certain industries during the early republic, and that should be bringing in revenue, right? But it's not because of the cost in collecting that revenue. You have to pay employees to collect that revenue from those monopolies. You have a lot of government employees that are involved in those industries that are government monopolies, and they all have to get paid. Right? So the cost of paying for those employees to run the monopolies is really hurting the profits that otherwise would have been coming from those monopolies. So because the tax collection system is not efficient and people are able to sidestep it and the monopolies aren't providing enough revenue for the government, that means that the early Mexican Republic is in trouble financially. Okay, they can't pay their debts, they can't pay for the costs of running the government, paying government employees. Now,